Hello and welcome once again to episode 77 of Code Completion. We're a group of iOS developers and educators hoping to share what we love most about development, Apple technology, and completing your code. My name is Dimitri and I'll be your host once again for this episode, and I'm joined today by my fellow completionist, Spencer.
Hey there.
Last week, Apple announced the dates for WWDC 2022, so what better time to go over how to prepare for that? We figured since we're still quite a few weeks away from June 6th when the event is set to take place, we'll skip over what we think might be announced at WWDC and instead focus on what to expect from the event itself. So if you've never participated in a WWDC, you'll immediately start to notice WWDC is quite a mouthful. So what most veterans of the event call it is just WW for short.
Yep. So WW is, it's, I don't know. I would say it's like almost like Christmas for us in some ways, and then it's also perhaps a little bit dreaded in others. It's cool because a bunch of stuff gets announced. We have, sort of the keynote where, it's more of a broad thing, and then they have like sessions, and the sessions are what are really interesting because they dive a lot deeper into the things that are announced. So, for example, the only time that I went to WW was when the year that SwiftUI was announced, and they, announced SwiftUI and everything in either the keynote or the State of the Union. I can't remember. But then, like, immediately after, in the days following during WWDC, you could go to these sessions, and it was like less of a, hey, this is what we just, we're announcing this new UI framework, but it's more like, okay, let's get into like, how do you actually use it? So it's more of a hands-on experience, or, well, maybe not hands-on, but it's more of kind of like a smaller session where you're able to actually get some example code and get, a little bit more understanding into how something works. So for example, I think Paul Hudson was the one that kind of is theory crafting this. He's saying like, maybe we'll get some like core data for SwiftUI, and maybe that gets announced, and then they'd probably have a session on specifically like, oh, hey, here's how you can integrate core data into your SwiftUI, or whatever it is. I can't remember if that's what it was or not. Anyway, sessions are super cool because you kind of can get a deep or a direct kind of jumpstart into learning whatever gets announced, and also they tend to have things that maybe aren't announced, but
yeah, not to mention these sessions tend to be the only documentation you have for something, which is a little bit unfortunate, but it's also fortunate that you have anything at all, because some things just get added to the SDK, and there is nothing that describes how you're supposed to use it, or like there's no documentation at all. And you have no lead as to like how you're supposed to use this thing that got added. So sessions are like that prime way for you to get introduced to everything that is new. So that way you can take it a few steps further and learn about it, like either directly by asking or by playing around with it, or by checking out sample code and stuff like that. So every WWDC since the beginning has always had these sessions, and I usually draw an analogy to kind of like an assistant, a guest lecture at a university. Like this is something that is, at least in our world of Apple platform development, the latest and greatest breaking new technology that is now available to us as app developers to go ahead and develop for the platform. So in some ways, it's like it like lags behind what academia actually works on, but in others, it's ahead of it because this is just where the industry is, and the industry like takes and gives in equal capacity. So there is a lot to learn from the sessions. And that is like the prime reason for the event itself. That said, most people are not necessarily excited about WWDC for the sessions themselves. They're excited for a very different reason. Keynote is where more the general public can get a preview as to like what's coming in iOS 16 in this case and macOS 13. It still feels weird to say macOS 13 because I'm like used to macOS 10.13 and like that's old. So I guess once we pass 16, then it will be fine. Because we never had a macOS 10.16.
Right.
But in any case, yeah. So the keynote is where Tim Cook and everyone else that was part of the process of developing the new OSs, not necessarily hardware, but the new OSs will come up on stage and basically go over like what's new as far as new features that are coming out. And those features may or may not have a developer component to them. And sometimes you get excited. It's like, oh, maybe we'll be able to do that in our app. It's like, nope, you have to do that from scratch if you really want it. So the keynote is very much for the public to consume along with the rest of the developers that are watching. And the State of the Union, which usually comes right afterwards, after lunch usually, is the event for developers where it gets into the nitty gritty. It's like there's code on stage, and you learn about like some new fancy thing that just got added to Swift that we usually know about ahead of time because Swift is public. So that's usually not a surprise. But like new Xcode usually gets previewed and demoed. Probably new Swift Playgrounds this year or something of the sort. And you get a rich introduction to the actual APIs that got added. So that would be like what you want to definitely make time to watch on that Monday, which would be June 6th this year, to kind of get that information as soon as possible, because that's going to help lead you into which sessions you might be interested in, because all we have at that point is just a list of sessions. So this would actually tell you like, hey, these are the actual technologies that those sessions refer to.
Right. Yeah. And the best part about the sessions is like you said, you'll definitely want to check out the keynote and the State of the Union like a day of, just to know what's available, and both kind of from the user facing but also developer side. But then the sessions, they're recorded, both these ones that we have kind of virtually and past ones. And so you could go to the developer app and watch those sessions again. You know, like for me, when I was kind of relearning Swift UI, or kind of brushing back up on it like a month or two ago, I rewatched those sessions because I had forgotten a lot of, just a bunch of just stuff about Swift UI. And, in that time, that was, I think a couple of the ones that I watched were from 2021. And even in that time, I think a couple things had changed, and the ones from previous sessions changed. So they're not always like, the code that shows on screen isn't always going to be exactly what you do, but it's going to give you a pretty rough general idea of concepts to follow, or, if something changes name, you could probably Google, like what is the new name for X thing. I can't remember exactly a great example. Like, I don't even think state object existed, for example, in Swift UI to start with, or something like that. So, that's super nice. You've also got like labs where, when it was in person, you could go in and schedule a time to actually sit down one-on-one with an Apple engineer to look through your code, and that was super cool. I didn't use the time, but when I was there with at WWDC, I went with Paul Solt, who did schedule some time, and I just kind of tagged along just to see how it was, and it was super cool. I mean, just a line of developers, asking Apple engineers for questions, and they were all kind of segmented out into like, this is the MapKit team, this is the Swift UI team, and whatever. Paul Hudson, like I got to see Paul Hudson like talking with an engineer and stuff, and that was super cool. But they still do those labs virtually as well, so you can still schedule those. And I'm not sure how they do it, if they do it through like WebEx or something. They do it through WebEx.
It's WebEx generally. And you can't tag along anymore, like you used to be able to, because it's very much like a private conversation. But it's a lot better nowadays, because you can go ahead and submit in advance what your question is, so you'll get the engineer that knows exactly what you're talking about, rather than you show up at the lab and you find out, oh, that engineer was here yesterday, and therefore like you're out of luck. So yeah, although I do miss those times where you like show up to a seemingly empty lab and then you get like all the engineers surrounding you, like offering different pieces of advice on how to solve a particular problem. That isn't possible in these times, but we traded it for something that works a little bit better, because you still get one or two engineers that are helping you, and they are more focused exactly on the problem that you are trying to solve. So that generally helps. But yeah, to add a little bit more detail, labs are where you can get your questions asked, whether they are, how do I go about this? How do I use this new technology that was just announced? How can I work around this bug that exists in the frameworks? All of those kinds of questions are open, and they're generally very, very nice about like working with you to find a solution that works. You just need to be like open to outside criticism, if that's what it's called.
Yeah. Pretty cool. Rare opportunity to sit down with an Apple engineer and do that. So if you have something that, you think merits that attention, then I'd definitely do it just for the experience. And I haven't even done it, but I'm sure it's fantastic. And I loved just kind of sitting in on Paul's. And it was very cool to kind of see them going back and forth and really working through. I can't exactly remember what he was doing, but, working through on a pretty deep level. Whatever his problem was, I think it was like an API limitation or something. So really cool. Definitely would recommend. 10 out of 10.
It's funny you mentioned that as you were tagging along, because I remember the exact opposite. Like, I was the Paul in your story, and I had a friend who tagged along. And since I was the only one at a seemingly empty lab on like AV Foundation or something nitty gritty, I ended up with like all of the engineers helping me, and then that friend later was recounting like, oh, you should have just followed Dimitri to the labs. He got all the engineers. It was like a great discussion. I just remember him telling that story, and awesome. I was just laughing because it's just really funny. But you mentioned the developer app, and I think that's also something we should focus a little bit on.
Yeah.
And the developer app is a great way of consuming all the information that's coming out of WWDC, because it is a lot of information. Yes. Like, it will easily pack 8-hour workday for the entire week. So the developer app has all the sessions in it. It has all the sample code. It has transcripts that you can go ahead and click and jump to that location in the video. Apple's a lot better nowadays of updating the sample code in there to like make sense post beta 1, because that's generally what it matches. Is like, hey, this is the first beta we're sharing with you, and things change over time for the better. So the developer app is your hub to kind of get access to all this. That said, there's a developer app for your Mac, for your phones, but also for your Apple TV. So if you have an Apple TV and a large screen, I definitely suggest like setting up a mini office in your living room, and kind of working out of there for that week, because you can just have all the sessions just play off of there directly. And that is generally a much easier way to consume them, because they don't come out all at once. They come out, like, they trickle out every day. So that's a great way of kind of having a constant feed of sessions that best mimics like the in-person WWDC without the room packed full of people and lines and stuff like that. So if you don't have the developer app, I would definitely suggest downloading it. Usually once the keynote hits, then all the sessions kind of show up throughout the week. So then you can go ahead and start starring them, and make a system for yourself to know which ones you're interested in and which ones you aren't, so that way you can kind of follow along with just the ones you are interested in.
Yeah, I was going to mention the starring. That's like maybe not my favorite part. It's super helpful though to have that, because that's what I'll do is just go through and star all the things that I think I'm interested in, and then it ends up being like half of the like 50 sessions that there are. But then you can come back and whether it's in person or online, they've got, probably 3 or 4 sessions going at the same time. So there's just no way that you can keep up. So being able to star them is nice for consumption later.
Mm-hmm. Another key piece of WWDC, every year when it is announced, there's always a Swift student challenge that is also announced. Well, it hasn't always been Swift, but there's always a student challenge of some sort that students can take part in. And this applies to all sorts of students. So if you are a student in high school or in university, this applies to you. If you are part of a boot camp, you can usually make this apply to you. You might need to get a letter that says like you're participating in that boot camp. If you are not a white male and you participate in lots of smaller diversity communities, this applies to you. So make sure that you are a member of those communities now. Become a member in the most like concrete way. Like usually there's a button for that, make an account, participate. That will help make you eligible for this. But the Swift Student Challenge is really cool because one, it gives you something to practice on. Like you can flex your programming knowledge as best to your ability. It's not competition per se. It's more of like they're interested to see who is putting effort into wanting to participate in this. And as a result, you oftentimes win a bunch of swag, which is really nice. Like you used to get swag as a part of the $1,600 ticket price. But the students got in for free, so that was always like a benefit there. But nowadays, you just get a bunch of swag. You get to meet Tim Cook, and I think you're invited to Apple Park for their keynote event. So if you are anything that qualifies as a student, then definitely take part in this. It's a lot of fun. You get to meet a lot of people in your same cohort that you can then like forge friendships with for the rest of your career. So definitely worth it.
Yeah. Didn't Lynn do that?
Yeah, Lynn did it when she was part of Lambda. I encouraged her to try her best to do it. I did it in my last year as a linguistics student. So not at all like computer science related. Like I had gone to WWDC in the past, but I missed a ticket. So I was like, I am going for the student pass because lotteries. We'll talk about that later. But yeah, it's definitely a great fun time. So definitely participate if you can. It's not difficult by any means. If you've been doing any amount of programming up until this point, if you're just starting off, like you started learning Swift yesterday, it might be a little difficult if you don't have any other programming knowledge. But if you have been studying programming for a few months, and Swift in particular, then this should be something fun to challenge yourself with.
Yeah, and it's not anything insane. I think the requirement even is that you do it in a Swift playground at this point. So it's not...
Yeah, so not a playground. You have to use the Swift Playground app to make an app.
Right.
So
it's,
they're mixing it up this time.
Oh, gotcha.
And the last piece of WWDC, which was kind of new last year, it's like a combo of a Slack workspace that they invited everyone to, and office hours, which was a new kind of event that you can go to. Like there's a specific time period for them, and you can ask questions and they will kind of answer them live. So that was a great kind of Q&A replacement for a lot of the sessions, though they were very focused on like a few key piece technologies. So it's not like you can go there with like a question on the Accelerate framework like you used to be able to do. Like this is not the place for that, but for new stuff in SwiftUI, this is a great way to like have all the SwiftUI team there, and someone is going to be able to answer your question. So definitely do participate in that. I think, what's his name? I think it's Matt from Big Mountain Studio, or Mark. Yeah, Mark. Yeah. Sorry, Mark. Your name is not Matt. Mark from Big Mountain Studio did an excellent job archiving this for SwiftUI because that's what he focuses on in his books. And we'll leave a link in the show notes for last year's but there is a lot of great information in there, which I refer to every now and then because Google definitely leads me there. Because there's no answer anywhere else for a few of these.
Yeah, it's cool to get, again, it's like a more generalized lab where it's not one-on-one, but it's, for example, the SwiftUI team on just any people that want to ask. So you can get the answer directly from the source. So that's super cool. I'm definitely going to participate in it this year. I didn't last year, but I did. I have looked through, like, for example, Mark's SwiftUI thing, and it's very, very cool. Good stuff in there. And it's also like, hey, is there this thing? And they're like, oh, no, we should, that would be great to add as a radar or a feedback so that, they can kind of gauge interest on, is this something that should be prioritized, I suppose. So.
And as we mentioned all of these things, I do want to reassure you that you don't need to participate in all of them. There is so much that comes out this week that it can easily become overwhelming, that you don't know necessarily what to do next. So do know that these things exist and are available, so that way you can go ahead and participate in them. But don't feel pressured into needing to participate in all of them.
Yeah.
That's just the one thing I want to reassure you of. Everything is pre-recorded. Everything can be consumed at a later date. In fact, I often take 2, 3, 4 weeks after WWDC to actually go through all the sessions. Because there's just not enough time to do everything. So don't feel like you need to. That's all.
Yep, definitely agree. And like I said, I've not participated in labs. I've not participated in these office hours now that they've been a thing online and stuff. So doesn't mean you shouldn't, but doesn't also mean that you should and need to as well. So kind of up to you.
Yeah. That said, there is something new this year, right?
Yes. So they're going to have a special day for developers and students at the Apple Park to watch the keynote and the State of the Union videos together, along with the online community itself. So I don't think at this point they've actually added information on how to apply, if I'm correct.
Yeah. So I expect this to fully be a lottery that you may or may not get a ticket. I don't think they'll be charging for them since it's on their own home base. They don't need to rent out a conference center. Spoiler alert, the ticket that you paid for WWDC paid maybe 20% of the entire cost of WWDC for Apple. They did not make money off of the 5,000 developers that came there with that $1,600 ticket price. That was purely just to offset the costs a tiny bit. So if they're hosting it themselves, I don't think they will need to charge anything, especially it's just a one-day thing. So this will probably just be a fun way of easing out of pandemic times and into something that is more akin to an in-person event, because in an in-person event you get to meet the people that you haven't seen since last year. There's a lot of that you just don't get from an online thing. That said, there are tons of benefits from having it be all online. So that said, what do you expect this event to be? Do you think they're gonna have a live keynote, or do you think it's just gonna be a projection screen and they're just gonna put the keynote recording on there and you gotta watch live with everyone else?
Yeah, I don't know. It's a good question. I probably think it's going to be pre-recorded, but maybe they'll have, Tim Apple and Craig come out afterwards and talk with them a little bit or something. Make it an in-person, not in-person event, if that makes sense, where I'm sure that, I don't know, if I were having to be a part of the keynote, I would love to have it be pre-recorded so I could, if I flub something, I could redo it or whatever. That sounds super scary to me, doing it all live. But at the same time, if they're inviting people, kind of seems like there will be some live aspect to it, even if it isn't the keynote. I don't know. What do you think?
Yeah, so I'm really leaning towards they set up a giant projection screen, and you kind of get a watch outdoor style on their lawn, and I think that's probably the closest thing that will get to a live aspect of it. Like they will be watching live with everyone else around the world, but they'll be part of a giant audience, which adds so much to energy. In the past, when I haven't gotten a ticket to WWDC, I did participate in AltConf, which is a conference that takes place right next door to WWDC. And they always set up a theater room where you can watch the keynote with everyone else, same way. And that is way better than just watching in your living room, just because there's so much energy there. So I don't think that they'll probably put people in the Steve Jobs Theater or anything like that. I think it's still a bit too early for that, especially as COVID cases are climbing again. So if they do anything at all, I do think it'll be outdoors. They'll probably set up a giant projection screen in the shaded area of Apple Park's disc, and everyone can kind of watch from afar with giant speakers, and they'll be able to see and hear, and I think that'll be great. That's because cool. If you are in the area, that is something that you can go ahead and hang out with all the people that you probably see more often than those of us that are not in the area. So I don't think I'll be going to something like this because I am not in San Jose, and it's kind of a waste to go up there just for one day, especially with all the traveling involved. But if you are in the San Jose area, there'll probably be a sign up link where you'll just get a lottery ticket, and if you win, you win. If you don't, you don't. And yeah, I think it'll be a lot of fun for the people there. It's just probably going to not be worth it for anyone else, especially if you're going to be traveling back and forth just for that day, because then you'll be missing out on everything else of WWDC.
Yeah, for sure. One thing that's been cool about kind of going on the flip side of it not being in person is, well, we mentioned a couple things. They've been able to do these office hours and everything, but also along with that is because they're not okay, so for example, when I was at WW, they had I think probably 3 or 4 sessions going at the same time, and so what they had to do was time block out, I don't know, an hour and a half, I can't exactly remember, but maybe some sessions went really short, right? And so it's just you're chilling there for that kind of intermediate amount of time while the other sessions finish up, and then you can go to another session. But because it's online, I think it's really nice that if you get a short session, some sessions are 20 minutes and it's done, some are longer, but because it's all online, you can kind of do it at your own leisure or immediately, hop into another session. So for as much of the social and the cool parts about just hanging out in this conference center with a bunch of people that kind of share a lot of your same interests, I think there's also some really good parts about it being online as well. I think they've done a really good job about it, really is I guess what I'm trying to say.
Not to mention the State of the Union was always rough for a lot of developers, especially the ones that went to either wake up early to join the line or were there all night.
Yeah.
I don't know who those ones were.
Oh, yeah, that'd be weird.
Yeah. It's since 4 p.m. the previous day, total wackos. But before you think I'm making fun of anyone, that's me. So it was always rough to kind of stay cognizant during those times, and be able to really process what's being announced, and it was not the best way to kind of consume a lot of technical knowledge that you need to remember to do your job. So that's another immediate benefit of it being online, is it forces the crazy ones like me to not do that, and just sleep like a normal person on that day.
That's awesome.
So let's move into how to prep for WWDC, because as we mentioned, it seems like a whole lot. So what are things that you can do to kind of make sure that you get the most out of it without expending a whole ton of energy the week of and then getting completely drained?
Yeah, I think, well, Paul Hudson, Dimitri has this really good link to Paul Hudson's WWDC repo, and it's got a ton of information there, but really you can kind of just go over what came out last year, what was announced, and for example, Swift UI, going back again from Swift UI, we've had Swift UI as a kind of a key set of sessions for the last couple of years. You could go back and kind of, if you're like, you know what, I'd really like to make the most of the very probable Swift UI changes that are coming, be good to have a base of knowledge from previous sessions. You could, I don't know. I don't know. Yeah. Well, how would you prep for that stuff?
Yeah, so I often joke that like someone should hold or write a bunch of articles of what was announced 2 years ago at WWDC, because that's what you can start using right now. Because
True.
like you've waited for those versions to kind of become the main version that everyone is running. So there's reasons to watch all the sessions for that. But as you mentioned, just kind of getting up to date with like what was just announced is going to be the starting point for what is going to build upon that. So not everything is going to get a continuation story. Like Combine was a classic framework that got announced with a lot of excitement, and then nothing happened to it year one. Afterwards, nothing happened to it 2 years down the line. And now Apple has basically said like, hey, we have a new set of APIs that we're releasing completely asynchronous to the main SDK, called async sequence APIs. I don't remember what they're called, but they have a bunch of APIs that build upon async await and async sequences to be able to do a lot of things that Combine did, like throttling and stuff like that. So they basically spelled out that the writing is on the wall for Combine, because you have like a first party language feature that kind of negates its need. And makes it something that works a lot better. So if anyone has done any amount of Swift server stuff with Vapor, Combine is basically the same thing as the event loop features that you're used to working with, except it calls them promises and consumers, I think. I've used Combine to like a capacity of, oh, let me copy paste someone else's block of code that seems to work, and this seems to work for me too. I think subscriptions and publishers or whatnot. But in any case, like async await does all those things, and async sequences, as I've said for a while, do all those things as well. So I don't think Combine is going to get a year 3. In fact, we're likely going to see the replacement of Combine this year, as far as APIs go. But a lot of things like Swift UI, like those directly build on what came previously. And there's a lot of sessions on networking that I'm always interested in that build upon the previous ones, and kind of tell a story of like how things are evolving little by little. And they will mention like, hey, last year we talked about this, and this, and this year we're kind of building on that. So refreshing yourself over the next 2 months is a good way of like, one, adding to your knowledge, because now you probably know a little bit more than last year. So you can go ahead and fill in those gaps. And two, being ready for what's going to be announced and getting excited, and like making your own wish lists in the back of your head. So that's a great way of prepping session wise.
Yeah. Sorry, real quick before we move on, I just wanted to mention in the WWDC, or sorry, the developer app, they'll usually do like a what's new in session, and those would be probably really good to brush up on as like a very more of a general thing, and not like, hey, this is how let's see, what was the one in Swift UI? It was like sorry, 1 second. Right, like they have more like an 11-minute session, like craft search experiences in Swift UI. It's not like that detailed, but it's more of like, here's what got announced, here's what Swift UI is going to have in a little bit more of a broad sense. So that would probably be a good thing to prep for if you're like, what's going to be new in Swift UI, this year.
Definitely. And they usually like organize them by featured sessions and stuff like that. So you can probably just focus on those unless you're really interested in something else that you just didn't register the first time around. So those ones would generally be the best. And again, you'll fill in the knowledge that you probably forgot about in the process. So they're always great ways to like catch up on stuff. Not to mention, if you ever have like difficulty falling asleep at night, they make excellent fall asleep videos to just like have running on your iPad. Not saying that because they're boring or anything, but I've found personally that anything that's like rich in technical material is excellent to fall asleep to, because your mind will like overwork itself and then crash.
You're using brain power.
Yeah, and it's not gonna, generally speaking, it doesn't like overwork itself and keep you awake in the same way that like a enticing story might like keep you up many hours into the night, because you're not left wondering what's coming next, but you're just like pondering on that thing that someone said, and then you start like closing your eyes and imagining it, and you like completely shut down at that point, and that's like an excellent way to fall asleep.
Nice.
So WWDC videos and lectures on quantum physics, A+, gets you thinking.
Yep. Nile Red videos too. They're awesome, but they are technical.
Yep. Saving us from that moment of weakness for both of us. Another thing you can prep for are the labs. So come prepared into the week of DubDub with questions within your own apps. Make sure the code around the area is kind of cleaned up. Get ready to ask the question in prose, so that way you can go ahead and once those lab sessions open up, you can immediately start registering for them and saying like, hey, this is my question. I failed a feedback about this already. Like you don't want them to tell you mid-session, for that bug you mentioned that you know is a bug, can you file a feedback for it, and then we can look into it. File the feedback first with all your sample code that might be related, and this is the chance that someone's going to look at your feedback. Like 100% guaranteed. They will look at that feedback, and they're not going to respond on the feedback thing, but they're going to respond directly to you and help you work around it or find a different way. Like if you just say like, hey, this is not working, that's not going to lead to a constructive conversation. But if you say like, hey, am I doing this wrong? Are there any alternatives that I can go about like solving this? Is there some wacky private API side channel that I can perhaps use just to kind of fix this bug for my customers? Like the developers themselves, they're often the engineers at Apple, those developers are often very happy to help you fix like the problem that you're trying to solve, because they're building a product for you. Like the APIs that they're building, that's their users are you. So as best as they can help you, that is going to help out the most. Not to mention, this is probably the one time a year that you'll get anything fixed that you request directly. So getting an engineer's eyes on it directly via a lab may be the only chance that you can get something fixed. Like you can give them a convincing story as far as like a user story, if you will.
There you go.
About why that bug is important to you and how it will like help make your app better. And if you can convince them in that moment, then they will probably just get that earworm and just fix it, because they have the engineering time to actually do that. So if you go ahead and submit bugs on beta 8, probably never going to be fixed. But if you get them in during beta 1, even if they're old bugs, you have a much higher chance at kind of getting them included for that year's release. So definitely try for it. Use the labs to your advantage. And sign up for as many of them as you can. The labs are way more important than the sessions. Sessions are all pre-recorded. The labs only happen once, or sometimes again during tech talks later in the year. And I applaud Apple for doing that. That was like my one request every single year when they ask for feedback at the end of DubDub is like, hey, make these labs available more often, because like you don't know you need them on day one of week one. Like you didn't even touch the API yet. But a few months down the line, that's when you realize. So they do that nowadays. I don't know if they're going to continue doing it. I hope so. But yeah, definitely pre-file for feedbacks. Pre-file your feedback reports or radars or whatever you want to call them. Go ahead and prepare for the labs that you're potentially interested in. There's always a lab on every API, or something that kind of fits in there. And if you get close enough, they'll usually pull in the engineer from the other team that can help. So definitely make the most out of that.
Yep. Another thing would be to just make sure that you have, as much time as is reasonable to kind of focus on DubDub while it's going, whether, you have signed up for labs and, you need to make time to be there for the lab, or you just want to watch the keynote, State of the Union, and a bunch of sessions or whatever. That probably depends on your job, or if, I'll stick with the job for now. Like at my current job, it's pretty open where we usually just all will watch the keynote and the State of the Union, and then, kind of like as you want, you can watch whatever sessions you want. It's pretty just whatever. But like when I was teaching at Lambda, we'd watch the keynote and maybe the State of the Union with the students, but then from there we had to get on with the rest of our day, and so it was kind of like a asynchronous, do it on your own time type of thing. And so that, it just depends on the job, I think. But if you can convince your employer to let you watch some sessions and be like, hey, we're going to be using a bunch of Swift UI or a bunch of async await, convince them however you want to let them watch it in the moment, and just say, hey, the sooner we learn this, the sooner it can get implemented into the app or whatever. So
yeah, from personal experience, you shouldn't have a very hard time if your main role is an iOS developer or a macOS developer, Apple platform developer in general. You shouldn't have a hard time convincing your boss to focus on this for this week. Yeah. It's not vacation. It certainly is not vacation. You will be mentally outcapacitated by the end of this week. I guarantee you, like, you are going to be filling your mind with so many ideas and new avenues to explore the whole time. So it will definitely be beneficial to your team and everyone you're working with for you to focus on this. So make sure from now you let them know, like, hey, on June 6th to June 10th, I believe this year, or June 11th. I don't know. It's always sometime around then. Right. Go ahead and make sure that you can have time to focus on this and not deal with like a release or anything like that, because the more you focus on this now means the less you can focus on it later. The more you can get bugs that you've experienced fixed. Like, make that case, like, say, hey, this is our one chance to talk with Apple engineers. Yeah. I would like to make the most out of it, so that way we can fix all of these old bugs that we have that are potentially framework bugs. But you don't know. Like, that's the wonder of labs is they can go ahead and help you do that and solve those problems. So definitely practice this if you've never kind of done it before. But if you're a junior on an iOS team, you shouldn't have too much trouble like convincing anyone that this should be the focus of your time, because this is where you will make the most of progressing yourself for your team, if that makes any sense.
Yep, definitely.
And if you are in the San Jose area or Cupertino, it's all Santa Clarita Valley, like that whole area, do keep an eye for that Keynote invite lottery thing that may or may not be a lottery, who knows. But that will definitely be a fun way of spending that Monday and getting to know a bunch of people and seeing a bunch of people you may only know online. I can almost guarantee there will be tons of people there. It seems like San Francisco in general is kind of over the whole pandemic thing. So like people are kind of gathering in person. So do keep an eye out for that. It will definitely be worth it. Be safe if you are going. Like I if I were in the air, I would still wear a mask, even if it's outdoors, even if it's kind of like not in an indoor kind of scenario. But like to each and every one about how you want to judge your risk for things like that. But it will still be really fun if you can make it. So do keep an eye out for that.
Yep. And with the labs, they usually open up after the keynote or the State of the Union, if I remember right. And I think you can kind of sign up as long as there's space the day of, or maybe the day before. I can't quite remember.
Yeah, I think if they are still open the day of, they stay open. But they tend to fill up quite fast. So if you
it's
do
first
have
come, first serve.
if you have anything in particular you want to ask, do make sure to sign up for it.
Yeah.
They fill up quickly. That said, the ones that do fill up the most, they generally open up a second one, just to like continue giving people the most chances they can get. But if it kind of doesn't fill up until the very last minute, they're probably not going to do that. So do go ahead and flood the system. Do make sure to make all of the ones that you like reserve. Like, don't waste their time. Like, they will not appreciate that. Especially since they are giving up their time instead of working on their regular jobs to help others. Don't squander that. For all of us as a community, we don't want people setting a bad example. So sign up for as many as you need, but do make sure to make them. This week's episode of Code Completion is brought to you by Pennant. Calling all sports fans. Want to keep track of the season, but there's so many teams and not enough time? Check out Pennant. Pennant provides sports standings at a glance. Pennant displays league standings as a simple bar chart where the best teams rise to the top throughout the season. Of course, you can dig in deeper with team stats, game results, and more. Version 10 introduced the all-new customizable My Pennant view, where you can build a wide selection of visualizations for any sport, division, or team. Unlock Pennant Premium to add as many blocks as you'd like and put any of them on your home screen as a widget. Whether you follow MLB, NFL, NBA, NHL, or MLS, Pennant has you covered with more sports and leagues coming soon. Thank you so much to Pennant for sponsoring Code Completion. Download Pennant on the iOS App Store today. So, as always, I want to personally thank everyone for listening in this week. Please be sure to follow us on Twitter at Code Completion to know when new episodes get released, and feel free to tweet at us if there's ever a topic you'd like for us to dig into. Most importantly, as a small podcast, please be sure to share this with your friends and family who are also interested in any part of the process of app development. It doesn't even have to be code related, as you saw this week. We talked about DubDub. It's your support that enables us to continue doing this, and we hope to grow a healthy community around everything we discuss. Once again, I want to give my thanks to Spencer, who is at Spencer C. Curtis. That's SpencerCurtis on Twitter for joining me this week. My name, once again, is Dimitri. You can find me at Dimitri Buñol. That's DimitriBouniol. And we'll see you all next week.
Bye.
So, do you think WWDC will ever be in person again?
Yeah, I think so. But I don't know if it will come back in maybe the same capacity or the same format. I don't know. I think, like I said, I think the transition from, always having been in person to these last few years having been completely just online have been pretty good. Sessions, like I said, I love that the sessions, some are literally 11 minutes long and some are, 40 minutes long. And that's really nice that they can kind of work it out like that. And I would assume scheduling venues to kind of handle that would be a lot harder. So maybe it's shorter in person, like maybe it is still going on for a whole week, but there's only 1 or 2 days where it's in person. I don't know.
Like I do think that we'll be giving up a lot for it to be in person. I think that the more studio produced keynotes and sessions are way better. They are edited. They cut out any unnecessary bits and pieces. They're not trying to fill an hour, as you mentioned. Like in the past, a 20-minute session today would have been an hour session. It just had to be. So it's going to be padded with stuff that was from like just reminders from a year ago, 2 years ago. Nothing new. And that more or less felt like, oh, I got 1 or 2 nuggets out of this, and that was interesting. But those 1 and 2 nuggets could have been just 20 minutes. Kind of like the 10-minute YouTube video phenomenon where like every YouTube video is 10 minutes. I don't know if you've noticed this. There is maybe like 1 or 2 nuggets of information in every video, but it needs to be 10 minutes to get ad revenue, and therefore they are 10 minutes. They're just padded and repeat the same things 3 or 4 times to get there. So that's just how it needs to be. But WWDC doesn't need to be that. It can be like, here's a quick 20-minute thing on this like super cool API and how to use it in 2 different situations, and done. There are even like 5-minute super short sessions. And they used to just like add those at the very end as like a little video thing for like the 2 people that need CarPlay. Like actually implementing CarPlay in cars, not like implementing in apps kind of thing. So like they do have those, but they were very rare, and now like almost all sessions are like that. Similar for the keynote. Like the keynote had to be 2 hours just to like fill in a block of time that made it reasonable for people to actually attend. Nowadays, like keynotes are just an hour, even 40 minutes sometimes. They just get through it a lot quicker. They don't need a pad with like, here's our retail stores are going, and then like all the stuff that like you don't care. Here is a 20-minute game demo to
oh my gosh, like, dude, the AR game demos, dude.
It's not all the AR ones, like just in general.
No,
like here's this new like killing mechanism game, and they're gonna show off all their fancy effects for 20 minutes, and like I could not care. Those are the points in time where like as I was staying up since 4 p.m. the previous day, and like sitting through the keynote, that's when I would like start to doze off, but didn't want to doze off because the camera would like pan on the audience and gauge like excitement, and it's like there's no excitement.
Everyone's sleeping.
So yeah, to those aspects, I definitely don't want an in-person WWDC because I feel like it would ruin them. Similar to labs, like the fact that you can pre-register for labs and have your questions screened, and someone will go ahead and like schedule the best engineers that can answer your question at the time that they can answer it. I think that is a clear improvement on labs. That said, maybe the things like office hours, those work better as an in-person thing where you can just have like a group and people can raise their hands and ask questions, and people can build upon those questions, and no one has to spend time typing. Maybe that works a lot better. Like one nice thing about sessions in the past is the shorter ones, like there were mics set up and you can ask questions, or you can head to the stage and just start talking with those engineers as like a micro lab, because they're right there. They just announce it. You can say, hey, like while it's still fresh in your mind, hey, how would you use this for this in this situation? They can go ahead and answer those questions. So those are like points for an in-person WWDC. So it's definitely like, who knows which is better at this point. I do feel like we've made a lot of advances with how things are set up now, that we might lose a lot of those if WWDC does return to something that is in person. Not to mention like all the travel, like just...
Yeah, I mean, people were traveling from all over. I mean, I'm a couple states away, but Paul, is from the East Coast, and then you have people from, the other side of the world that
trying
are
to get visas just to come over.
I mean, it's crazy. Like Dimitri mentioned the AltConf app, or sorry, the AltConf. They had an app where you could see where everyone was coming from, and it was just insane. Everyone was coming from everywhere. I mean, it still is a huge deal, but when it was in person, it was huge. And people, even if they didn't win the raffle and get a ticket to Dub, they just come to the I think it was the Marriott hotel right next door and just do AltConf there, and go out to dinner and lunch and everything. And that's where I met Dimitri for the first time. I actually, ironically, I've been cleaning this room in back of me here. It just is kind of like I don't know, mostly storage space, but I'll like work on computers and stuff in there. And I found your little business card.
Oh, my Moo card.
Yeah. I was like, oh, sweet. So I just found that yesterday. So I met Dimitri there for the first time. That was super cool. I mean, there's a social aspect to it, which when you get together with a bunch of people that aren't very social, it ends up being really fun, because we went to dinner, and I went with Andrew Madsen to get like some sweet ramen, and it was really fun. All of the aspects that were kind of around Dub, but not necessarily a part of it, if that makes sense.
Yeah. Yeah, like I definitely made an effort to go every year despite getting a lottery ticket or not. And that was mostly to connect with fellow developers that I would see only that time of year. But also, like AltConf was right there. There were interesting sessions that they also had. There was the capacity to sneak in for some labs. And
Yeah.
it,
I forgot about
it's
that.
just it was beneficial in general to kind of be there at that time rather than be at home. Nowadays, I would say it's more beneficial to be at home so you can better consume all the information than to be there. And I would almost rather Apple have subsequent events or tech talks that are more focused to individual cities, and that would maybe decrease the large amount of travel that would be necessary to attend these things, and you tend to form a more local clique than a large international one, which has its downsides, but it was getting to the point where there were far more than the 5,000 to 6,000 developers that were interested in going, and therefore, like the people that you met sometimes couldn't go the next time, and it would be harder and harder for them to make the case to go travel there. Like I'm in LA, it's just a drive away, literally. It's a few hours, but I don't need to get on a plane. I don't need to organize any visas. Like I could just get a hotel room and drive up, and that was a lot easier in San Jose than San Francisco because parking in San Francisco is a nightmare. But it was easy. For a lot of people, it's not easy. And it's something that I think today's WWDC benefits them a lot more, and there are a whole lot more of them than there were people that could make it in person.
Yeah, for sure. I'd say overall it's a net gain.
Definitely.
Online.
And I think if WWDC in the future just ends up being like a fun keynote day that for the people who can make it in person, they can go, then just hang out for that day. I think that is totally A-okay. In fact, if Apple were to kind of do that in a lot of major cities, like, hey, we rented out a theater. All the people in Utah go to this place and you can kind of enjoy it all together. And you'll get to like meet all the developers in your area. If you're in LA, you go to LA. If you're in Paris, you go to Paris. If you're in Tokyo, you go to Tokyo, kind of thing. I think that would probably be a lot more beneficial than kind of having a bunch of people fly out to one city and not get a whole lot out of it that you would have gotten a whole lot more online. Now, that doesn't mean that there aren't things that they could do throughout the week to benefit the people that are there. Maybe those Q&As are like filmed there and you can be in the audience, or you can be at home and type questions in, you know? Like there are many ways that they can go about doing it. So if there isn't ever an in-person WWDC, I expect it to be radically different, because the current way that they were doing it, I don't think is something that translates to something that can happen nowadays. Like it was kind of growing too far faster than it could kind of maintain. I remember in the very early days, like getting a ticket just meant buying a ticket. And then it turned into buying a ticket within 2 hours of it being announced. And then it turned in buying a ticket within 2 minutes of it being announced. And then it turned into buying a ticket and who knows if the server is going to crash on you and you're not going to get a ticket. Then it turned into the lottery, which was more fair, but at the same time, less fair to the people who really, really wanted to go. If you want to like look at it that way.
Yeah, I mean, that was the thing, right? Like, I think Lambda put in, all of our names to go to Dub. Maybe, or at least all of the full-time instructors. I can't remember, but Ben didn't get to go. Neither did Andrew. But me and Paul just happened to win, and so we both won. And it's like I felt so bad, especially for Ben, because I was like, oh man, So I get that it's fair, but also unfair.
Yeah, so it's we are in a better place now, and I think it would be a loss for us to revert back to like that in-person style, and like we get a whole lot of benefits out of it being asynchronous like this.
Yep.
So if Have you ever been to any of the tech talks that Apple kind of traveled around and did?
No.
So I've been to them once for an Apple TV one, and it was great. Like there was a little mini sessions for the Apple TV stuff. In particular, they set up a lab room where you can go ahead and like test things out and play around with it on hardware and show people and stuff like that. So that was all set up, and it was completely free and like very local. So if you're in the area, you're probably gonna get your ticket. If you're not in the area, it's like not worthy to fly out because they're gonna travel to your area next.
Right.
So it's sorry, there's a cat behind the computer doing chaos. So there's not a lot that you can announce new at things like that, but you can catch people up, have labs. Like labs apply no matter what time of year. Sorry, Sesame, stop it. I think this is the end of our podcast. She's biting all the cables behind them. So I don't know what train of thought I was going on, but yeah, in person bad, online asynchronous good. Meeting sporadically throughout the year, even better. Let's do this. See you soon, everyone.
All right, bye.
Bye.